Head Over Keels, actual naval stories.
It's us again, and we're here with the third episode of our Cinemarathon dedicated to the Head Over Keels series. Here with me is Sergey.
Senior Specialist on Military and Historical Projects.
And I'm Yegor. Before we start, we just want to remind you about the rules of our Cinemarathon. If we manage to hit the target number of subscribers, then you'll see a special bonus code at the end of the video that unlocks a combat mission, which can reward you with a container and 1 million credits. Now, let's find out whether you've managed to fulfill the previous task or not. You've done great! This means that a bonus code will be waiting for you at the end of this video. We're moving on.
Let's go.
Head Over Keels, actual naval stories. Lucky miss. In autumn 1943, the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was on board the brand new battleship Iowa, heading to the Tehran Conference. Fleet Admiral and Commander-in-Chief Ernest Joseph King, who was accompanying the President to the conference, being aware of Mr. Roosevelt's affection for the Navy, gave an order to the escorting ships to conduct drill training. Balloons were launched from the deck of Iowa, playing the role of enemy aircraft. The AA gunners readily shot down the targets, demonstrating their superb competence and accuracy. The second part of the training was a torpedo attack. The largest and most sluggish ship in the squadron, Iowa, was chosen as the target. The destroyer William D. Porter came into firing position. Orders were given from the bridge. The first torpedo tube, fire! The torpedo men also displayed their fine skills, just as if they were in a real battle, except the torpedo stayed in its tube. The second torpedo tube, fire! Suddenly, there came a hissing sound, and a torpedo splashed into the water next to the destroyer. Havoc erupted on the bridge. In just a few minutes, the torpedo would hit Iowa with the President on board. The destroyer's crew, using a searchlight, began to warn the battleship about the danger, but no one on the second ship could understand their unclear messages. Meanwhile, one of the signalmen on Iowa shouted, "Torpedo to starboard! This is not a drill! Torpedo to starboard!" The President was standing on deck, watching what was going on with great interest. The battleship's siren roared, and the vessel rapidly began to turn starboard. The anti-aircraft guns started firing very close to the board in order to hit the encroaching torpedo. Luckily, the battleship was maneuverable enough to dodge the torpedo, which detonated around 1,000 feet behind. After William D. Porter returned to the base, its commander prepared himself for the worst. Soon, he was called into King's office. The Commander-in-Chief scolded him for negligence and reprimanded him for his failure to hit the target, despite a most favorable tactical situation. They say the President himself asked King not to punish the crew and commander of the unfortunate destroyer. It was all because Franklin D. Roosevelt had great affection for the Navy.
It requires good luck to evade like that, don't you think? But you probably won't want to evade our bonus code. Let's try to recall some other stories involving torpedoes. There's surely something interesting about them.
There is a sad story about a U.S. Navy submarine that was destroyed by her own torpedo. How did that happen? It's 1944. Submarine USS Tang attacks a Japanese transport task force that was transporting aviation. A short circuit occurs inside the last torpedo released from USS Tang. It travels in a full circle, returns, and destroys the submarine 20 seconds after having been launched.
Horror.
Luckily, some crew members and the captain survived, but the submarine was lost. By the end of the war, the torpedoes had been rectified, and there were no further misfortunes of this kind. This story was also told in our Naval Legends episode, dedicated to submarine USS Batfish.
You can watch this episode by clicking the link in the description. I think we need to move on.
With pleasure.
Head Over Keels, actual naval stories.
The heroes of Dunkirk. It was the end of May 1940. The Germans had cut us off, pushed us to the coast near Dunkirk. We were short on ammunition and food. We were sure that we were done. Finally, Command decided to get us out of there. They sent a whole fleet for us. I remember early in the morning, we were ordered to board a small boat. We had only one thought: leave France as soon as possible. Just a few minutes later, we were aboard HMS Medway Queen, around 1,000 of us packed into the ship. And she sailed northwest towards home. The sand beaches of Dunkirk were getting farther and farther away. I swear it was the best sight I ever saw in my life. Aboard Medway Queen, we were finally given a decent meal. Everyone got a big portion of stew and a cup of naval cocoa. I've never eaten anything so tasty. Despite terrible hunger, we ate slowly, savoring each spoon of that delicious stew. We completely forgot about the war for a few minutes, but it didn't forget about us. German air raid. We didn't have time to react. Some of us were still eating when we heard the anti-aircraft guns of the Medway Queen hammering. They turned a German plane into a ball of fire, which crashed down and disappeared under the water. We cheered, but not for long. Several minutes later, there was a huge explosion. A nearby ship had hit a mine. The crew of the Medway Queen responded very quickly, and all the people from the sunken ship were taken aboard, safe and sound. In the evening, we arrived at Ramsgate. We were home at last, but Medway Queen prepared for another trip. We couldn't imagine that she was going back to that hell. How? She was an old paddle steamer that spent her entire career sailing on river cruises, carrying well-dressed tourists. And at the end of May, and the beginning of June 1940, she saved thousands of British soldiers from death or capture. Not only Medway Queen, but a whole flotilla, fishing trawlers, lifeboats, small motorboats, and pleasure yachts evacuated an army of 336,000 men from Dunkirk. All of us. During the Dunkirk operation, Medway Queen made 7 crossings of the English Channel, bringing around 7,000 soldiers to safety and shooting down 3 enemy aircraft.
What a story! It really cheered me up. You can see a bonus code on your screens. Enter the code to share in the joy. You want to know a more epic story? It was an inspiring operation, an operation of epic proportions.
There was a more epic operation, Magic Carpet. Have you heard of it?
No.
It was an operation of the U.S. Navy with the objective to return, just think about this number, 8 million soldiers home from Europe and Asia between October 1945 and February 1946. The operation involved 370 ships, both military and civilian ones, to get American soldiers and sailors back home. The U.S. Navy used some very surprising ships that were unfit to be transports from the beginning. Such ships had been used as aircraft carriers, for example, USS Lake Champlain, and even battleships, for instance, USS Washington, which had previously been part of polar convoys.
That's quite a number, 8 million people.
8 million people and 500,000 prisoners of war from North America, Germans,
On their way back,
to Europe.
just to avoid traveling light. Very cool. Let's watch the next episode. I hope it'll be as interesting as the previous one.
Head over keels. Actual naval stories. The Navy's here. Enveloped in flames, the German cruiser Admiral Graf Spee was slowly sinking in the shallow waters off the coast of Uruguay. Not long ago, she had been capturing and sinking civilian enemy ships in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. Many stories of that kind would be told by the 300 British sailors captured and kept in the cargo holds of the oil tanker Altmark, the partner of the German commerce raider. Now, Altmark sailed alone, and she set off for the German coastlines, attempting to secretly cover 7,500 miles. The runaway was already in the waters of neutral Norway when British pilots finally spotted her. In the short run, ships of His Majesty were sent to intercept Altmark. By then, however, the German tanker had taken cover in a fjord. Securing their neutrality, Norway's government did not permit the British crew to examine the ship under the German flag. When this information was received by the British Admiralty, Prime Minister Winston Churchill took responsibility and gave an order to liberate the prisoners. The British sailors decided to conduct a daring operation. Under the cover of night and neglecting diplomatic protocol, destroyer Cossack rushed bravely into the fjord. Altmark tried to escape, but the narrow fjord did not allow for any maneuvers, and the ships met side by side. This was like a two-century flashback in naval history. The crew of the British destroyer employed a good old pirate method for capturing enemy ships, and 25 sailors boarded the German oil tanker. After a short but fierce fight with the German crew, Altmark was captured. Having opened the cargo holds, the Cossack crew shouted, "The Navy's here!" which brought cheers from the prisoners. The next day, Cossack, with the liberated prisoners on board, was gleefully met in England. Since then, the call, "The Navy's here," has become the battle call of British sailors. However, that well-executed operation had far-reaching consequences for Norway. Hitler's government considered the Altmark incident a suitable pretext to claim that Norway was no longer neutral and begin expansion into the neighboring northern country.
Their Navy is here, and our bonus code is here. It's your turn to tell a story.
All right. It was the spring of 1943, the Pacific Ocean. Destroyer USS O'Bannon attempted to attack Japanese submarine RO-34 and came so close to the submarine that, according to the most colorful version spread by sailors, the destroyer couldn't aim her guns at the submarine because of the elevation angle. At the same time, the Japanese crew were arming their guns. The American crew didn't lose their heads, and, due to the absence of grenades, distracted the enemy by throwing potatoes at them. Another version, told by the ship's captain, saw him adding that we were so close to the Japanese that our cook was able to bombard them with potatoes, which resulted in journalists and listeners spreading the story in a rather deformed way. Naturally, the U.S. ship sent the submarine to the bottom, after moving some distance away first, by firing their guns and then releasing depth charges. But that wasn't the end of the story. It happened in 1943, and in 1945, the Maine Farmer Association, who were harvesting potatoes, sent a plaque to the destroyer. The plaque read, "For their ingenuity in using our now proud potato to sink a Japanese submarine in the spring of 1943. O'Bannon was a Fletcher-class destroyer, like Destroyer Kid that we shot an episode of Naval Legends about.
Perfect. You'll find the link to that video in the description. That's a great conclusion to our third episode and the entire Cinemarathon dedicated to Head Over Keels. The fourth episode and a new Naval Legends video about submarine Z-Hunt are coming next. And I want to remind you about the rules of our Cinemarathon. We need to get the target number of subscribers. You can see the number on the screen, so that the bonus code in the first pinned comment under the next episode will unlock a combat mission. If you do everything right, the bonus code will provide you with a combat mission that can reward you with a container and credits. If you fail, the bonus code will provide something pleasant but different instead. Good luck!
Bye.
Hey!